Hey everybody, welcome back. Sorry it's been a little bit of a absence the last few weeks. Just been very busy and taking care of some stuff, so I haven't had much time to do any filming. But we are back at it, and we're jumping into part 3 of our optic series, and this one is in reference to magnified prisms. So as we did before, we're doing the pros and the cons, and then we'll touch a little bit at the end of what I believe this particular optic is better suited towards. So, jumping right into it, the pros. So, they are, or rather, magnified prisms are relatively lightweight. Some of them are very lightweight. The way the advancements in magnified prisms have gone so far over the last few years, primarily the last 3 years or so, the magnified prisms have reduced their size by just about half of what you see here. This is an older, I guess you can say it's somewhat of a legacy magnified prism, and this one is a primary arms 2.5x prism. It's their SLX. This actually, when I bought this rifle, this came with it. This is actually my wife's BCM, and this is the optic that she has. Is actually the first primary arms optic we ever got, and for the longest time she's ran this optic and she loved it. But as advancements in technology have gone, this kind of falls back, and it's not an inherent issue with prisms, so to speak. It's just this particular prism because it's an older design. Now they're going with the micro prisms, so they are relatively lightweight. These guys are still there. It's, you can feel the weight is pretty hefty, but compared to some other options, especially when you start talking about scopes, the magnified scopes or the variable scopes, these are relatively lightweight. And like I said, you start getting into the micros, like the 3x micro prism from Primary Arms or maybe Vortex or any of the other ones. You're looking at around 7.5 ounces, maybe a little bit more, possibly even less. But I believe the 3x micro from Primary Arms is about 7.7, 7.8 ounces, which is very light. Pro number 2 is they are relatively compact. So as you can see here, it's not much bigger than my palm. Putting it up against the receiver, you'll see it's not adding a whole lot of length or size to the top of the receiver. So again, they are relatively compact. I don't even know if I have my ruler up here. Let me see if I've got it. I do not. I don't know where the hell that thing went. But anyway, they're relatively short and compact, even some of the older designs. Even if you look at the Trijicon ACOG, the one that's been in service since like the 80s, that thing is still, it's about the same size and length. Maybe a hair longer, but they're still short, especially when you compare it to a variable optic. So they're relatively compact. And then again, touching on the whole micro prisms that everybody seems to be making the shift towards, you're getting about half the length in reduction. So they're very, very compact. Most of them are about the size of a smaller red dot. So very compact. Third pro, they are extremely robust, and in my opinion, they are probably the most robust and durable optic that you can get for, a fighting rifle. There is 20 years of experience over in Iraq and Afghanistan, guys running the Trijicon ACOG, and then even some of the other magnified prisms that have taken some serious abuse, and they just continue to work. They just last. And a lot of that has to do with the inherent design of the prism. There's not a lot of moving parts. There's no electronics to really contend with, and the only electronics that you'll see in these is geared towards just the illumination of the reticle. So you don't have to worry about that being an issue. Should that go down, you still have a functional optic. So they are very robust. Fourth Pro is you're getting some level of magnification. Now, yes, it is only a fixed magnification. However, it's providing some type of magnification which will extend your effectiveness out to range depending on the magnification range of the prism. So if you're a very effective shot, say out to 200 yards with just iron sights, or 300 yards with just iron sights, or even a red dot, you throw something like this on, 3, 4x, whatever, you're now extending that capability. So you're going to be more accurate out to distance, and you're going to be more effective out to distance. Not only that, but you're gaining a level of PID capabilities. So as I've stated in the red dot video, your ability to positively identify any potential threat or hazard is limited by your eyesight. Whereas something like this is going to extend your ability to see clearly and identify potential threats or hazards. And, the fact that these have, a diopter adjustment on the back, you can clean that image up if your eyesight is a little bit less than perfect. So, and then if you wear glasses, then you can refine that image with your diopter, talking about clearing up that reticle. So extending your range, and you get your ability to PID potential threats and targets, extending that distance beyond what your normal eye can see. The fifth one is etched reticle. So etched reticles are there's two parts to it. One, it's etched into the glass, so you don't have to worry about any type of electronic failing and then deadlining the optic. So if your illumination goes down for any reason, you still have an etched reticle that you can use and utilize to engage targets or use to range if you can extend that distance out to whatever it may be that you see a potential threat or target. So you have an etched reticle that's always going to be there, minus the optic just completely failing. The other thing is people who have astigmatisms. So with the astigmatism and say a red dot, the red dots tend to bloom out, and I know this because I have an astigmatism. Mine is not as bad as some other people or even a lot of other people, but for me it looks like a star almost. I get these little commas that come off the dot itself. There's ways to mitigate that by lowering the illumination setting. That helps clear it up. Another thing that will help with that is if you flip up your rear sight and look through the peep to acquire your dot. It almost cleans up that image and forces your eye to really focus. And that helps to an extent. But you still have an unclean image because of the way that dot looks. With an etched reticle, there's nothing like that to contend with. Even with the illumination, it's only illuminating that reticle, so the reticle still, it remains very clean even though it is illuminated. So you get to combat that astigmatism, which is one of the pros that I also wrote down. It was actually the last pro I wrote down. The final pro I'm going to throw in is your mounts. You have a lot of aftermarket mounts that can help with the mounting and then the positioning of the the Magnified Prism. So as you see here, I think this one was from like Sightmark or something I got a few years ago. It's a QD mount. The original mount that came with it put this at like a slight cant. It was just a oversight by the QC department at Primary Arms. Again, this is going back to like their initial days when they started out, so I understand that. But I just found this. It was like $100 for the mount, and it's QD. So if I need to pop it off real quick, I can pop it off, and now I have the backups that I can utilize. So the mounts, pretty much all of the prisms that I know of are either going to use the ACOG or the mini ACOG mounting system. So there is a ton of aftermarket support for mounts. Now, a lot of great things in terms of the pros department, but there's always a flip side to things, so let's get into the cons. First con up is the most notorious one when it comes to prisms, and that is the short eye relief. Granted, some manufacturers with current and newer designs have been able to mitigate that short eye relief, but only to a certain extent. If you are taking the ACOG, the 4x ACOG, your eye relief is like 1.5 inches, which is very, very short. And if you're using the standard mount with a backup iron sight, you pretty much got to put your nose to the charging handle, which can create an issue in terms of length of pull depending on your size. So if you're a taller statured individual, say 6 foot or taller, and you really got to get your nose to the charging handle, that means you're going to have to collapse your buttstock, which crunches up that length of pull, and it's not very ergonomic. Now, referencing the mounts for the pros, they sell mounts that cant it back further so you can still get your eye relief while maintaining that comfortable length of pull. The downside is it's an added expense. So just keep in mind, Magnified Prisms inherently are going to have short eye relief. This one in particular, I think, is like 2.8 inches. So it's better than the 4X, but not much better. So field of view is my second con. Some optics have fantastic field of view, referencing the ACOG 4X again. The 4X ACOG has a fantastic field of view in terms of what you can see at 100 yards. I forget what it is. I can annotate it in the video. The downside is that as you try to increase the field of view, you tend to decrease your eye relief because of the way you position those prisms within the optic. So again, there's a give and take when it comes to that type of stuff. So a prism that is going to have a shorter field of view will tend to have a little bit longer eye relief, but again, that eye relief is still going to be limited to an extent. So your field of view is typically going to be a little bit tight on a tighter side, except for a few of them out there. Ones that I can think of is the ACOG 4X has a wider field of view, but you're giving up that eye relief, so that's shortening substantially. And I believe Swamp Fox, their Saber, I think it's their Saber 3X or 4X, whatever it is, that has a very big field of view. The downside is it's substantially heavier and it's substantially bigger. It's a very, very chunky optic and a very heavy optic for a prism, and you know that's the downside. So there's always that give and take when you're trying to get work out some of those issues. But field of view will tend to decrease, especially when you're going up in magnification range. The third one is a tight eye box. So because of the design and the nature, you're going to have not only the short eye relief, but your eye box is going to be pretty tight. So you're going to have to train that so that every time you present that rifle and you're looking down the optic, your face is in the proper position so you get that proper eyesight every time. And because of the tighter eye box, it takes more training so that you can acquire that picture more naturally on the fly. When you start getting into magnified prisms, depending on some of the prisms, some are worse than others. It takes some time to get used to finding that perfect eye relief and centering up your eye line, and then having to practice, ready ups or whatever, so that you can get your proper head position. So that is another issue to consider. A fourth one is glass quality. So this is primarily for budget line prisms, and a lot of people are going to live in that realm of budget line prisms. There's people that will invest the money into ACOGs, but with when you start getting into the high end ACOGs, you're spending over $1,000 on an optic, and they can be very expensive. A lot of people don't want to spend that type of money on something that's really not going to be a duty optic. It's maybe it's their life and liberty or whatever the case may be, their SHTF. So they're trying to find that balance of capability, robustness, and a financial window that they can live in. So you often will look at the budget line of things, and even a budget line is still going to be anywhere from $250 to $500. Now, with prisms, when you start getting into the budget line, the first place that they're going to cut cost is with the glass. The glass is still going to be capable. You're still going to be able to see things, out to distance. You're still going to be able to engage man-sized targets. However, because they're cutting that quality of glass to save money, the finer details, being able to distinguish certain features from background features or whatever, that starts to get very muddied. So yes, you'll be able to hit a perfectly contrasted white, IDPA size steel target at 400 yards with a 4x or a 3x, but are you going to be able to see that clearly if it was an actual combatant that's trying to mask their position? And that the short of it is, you're probably not. You're probably going to overlook that individual because that image is going to get muddied. So that's something that people need to take into account. It's often overlooked when talked about these budget micro prisms, or the prisms in general. The last one I got is mounts. The mounts, especially when you start getting into the budget side of things, again, they can cut corners there for cost savings, and you can get bad mounts, kind of like what I got with this primary arms that had the optic just like a degree or two canted. And if it wasn't for my OCD, I probably wouldn't have picked up on it, but I noticed it pretty quickly, and it frustrated me. Got the new mount, fixed the issue, no problem. So just be mindful when you start getting into budget prisms. There's a good chance that you can get a bad mount, or that mount can fail because sometimes they use subpar hardware, like the cross bolts for the mounting system, or it's just cheap material and they can bend or crack or anything like that. So just be mindful of that. One thing I do want to touch on is that because of the lack of 1x capability, you often are going to have to pair it with a top mounted or offset red dot, especially when you start getting into the higher side of the magnified prisms. I believe they only go up to 6x. I think 6x is the max for magnified prisms. So when you start running like 5 or 6x's, typically you're going to pair that with a top dot or an offset dot, because the bend and aiming concept isn't it doesn't work that well with those higher magnification ranges, because now both eyes are fighting for dominancy of that image, and typically your strong eye, or your if you're a righty, your right eye, as so long as you're not cross eye dominant, is going to be the one that's really taking over that image. So being able to use that bend and aiming concept begins to get hard. Thus, you implement something like a top mounted or offset red dot. The downside to this is, one, you are going to have an added increase in cost, because now you have to factor in both a mount and an optic for that system. And then two, it takes training, quite a bit of training, to be able to, on the fly, in a shortened area, or a condensed, confined area, to instinctively know to present the red dot, or the top mounted or offset mounted red dot, to engage your target. Most people are just training their standard shooting position, which is getting down behind the optic, getting that cheek weld, that head position, whatever, and they very rarely will actually work on their secondary system with the red dots. So on a fly, you're going to resort to your lowest level of training, and typically you're going to fall behind the optic. So just understand that that's going to take more training, thus adds more money to get comfortable with those. Are they a valid form of 1x for variability? Yes, they work. It just takes more training. So those are my pros and my cons. So where do I see a magnified prism living? Well, I will say you're going to live in those shorter intermediate engagement distances. So if you live in an area like you got, farmland or whatever, where your sight lines are maybe 300 yards max, 400 yards max, that is where I see the magnified prisms living. You can get away with some of the shorter stuff. So if you're indoors and you have an intruder, if you have a lower end optic like 4x or less, I would say 3x or less, preferably, you can make do with the bend and aiming concept, so long as you train on it and you understand how to do it and you're proficient. But if you're expecting most of your engagements to be at least 100 yards and a little and further, maxing out to say 300 to 400 yards, depending on the magnification. Obviously, if you're going out to up to 6x, you can extend that range to maybe 500 yards, 600 yards. But more of those shorter intermediate distances is where I see this living, and in those type of environments where you're rural with extended sight lines, but not like you live out in the Midwest where you can see a mile out, no problem, or even 1,000-yard sight lines. Most of it is shorter sight lines that extend a couple hundred yards. This is really good, and actually I prefer this for that situation over a red dot magnifier combo. I think it's just an inherently easier method of, or optic to shoot out to extended distances in that regard, and you don't have to worry about the red dot being an issue. And then now when you get that magnified prism, or the magnifier in line with your red dot, now that red dot went from a bloomed red dot to maybe like a little like tic tac looking thing, because it's not a clean dot, it's on an angle. So there's a lot of upsides to the magnified prisms. I think it just has, it's confined in its use because of its single magnification range, no variability. So again, you can work around that with red dots, offset or top mounted, or even if you have a if you're running a laser aiming module for night vision, but it has visible laser, you can use that and just you know, aim like you would normally do under nods. You just using that dot as your primary aiming source, say indoors. That works very well as well. So, but that's where I'm at with magnified prisms. If you disagree with anything that I've said, I'd love to hear about it. If you've had an experience, you know, whether it be indoors or extended distances with these magnified prisms, I'd love to hear about it. I do like hearing some of the ideas and some of the experiences from other people, because I learn stuff just as much as I'm trying to present the best information that I could for you guys. So, yeah, leave your comments down below. Let's have a conversation and stick around, because the next one coming up is going to be variable optics. I haven't figured out if I want to put it into LPVOs and, you know, high-powered variable optics, but maybe I'll separate those two videos and then do one for each. So, but stick around, because those are coming up, and I will catch you in the next video.